Midway Games had a rough patch in the business to the point where they were about to be out of it, until many parts of the company would be bought by Warner Brothers and Midway Chicago would be renamed NetherRealm Studios, headed by Mortal Kombat co-creator Ed Boon. And speaking of Mortal Kombat, that series would get a reboot of its own in 2011, going back to its 2D roots with 3D graphics, much like other modern reboots of rival fighters. And how does this bloodbath of a fighter fare? Let's find out. The story of the game is a retelling of the plot between the original Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat 3, which, let's be honest, would have been thrown to the sideline anyway without a story mode. But anyway, during the events of Armageddon, a struggling Dark Raiden would relay a message from the future to his past self to try and reverse what was done. Following that, even though Liu Kang would win like last time, the future didn't seem so certain as the necklace on Raiden's neck would further the crack, and on the way, some twists and turns not expected from last time. As co-creator Ed Boon would note, a character would get a cyborg upgrade, but to go even further, some characters will flat out die and become evil brainwashed spectral demons like Scorpion and Noob Saibot already were. And I got to admit, it is pretty damn cool to see a mainline fighting game have a story mode in a cinematic style with the fighting gameplay in between. And while it may be influential to mainline fighting games, it's been done before. The earliest I remember such being so, believe it or not, was by a popular licensed fighting game on the PlayStation 2 and GameCube, which is none other than Dragon Ball Z Budokai. While it's telling the familiar story DBZ fans have seen or read several times, Dimps actually put the effort to tell its story by animating it using their in-game engine. In addition, Budokai would add what-if scenarios like if Vegeta won on Earth or if Frieza won on Namek, if Cell had a Krillin form, and if Hercule Satan was the badass he claims he is while still being the goof. The only thing Budokai didn't have was the gameplay, which wasn't entirely up to snuff, but for my young DBZ fan self, it was pretty serviceable. But anyway, on to the gameplay of Mortal Kombat 2011, which, as I said before, harkens back to its 2D gameplay roots while still using 3D graphics. And thankfully, unlike most of the classic trilogy it's retelling, the game is a little more accessible to newer fighting game players. Though to be fair, the AI can still be a pain in the ass, especially when you get to Shao frickin' Kahn. At the least, you do have a higher chance of beating him on easier normal difficulties. Alongside the story mode, you got your standard arcade ladders, which can be played either by a single character or a tag team with a total of 34 characters to choose from, 35 if you have the PS3 due to the guest appearance of Kratos from God of War. And the game plays much like classic Mortal Kombat before it, but it's a little more pick up and play, with the moves feeling much more smooth and responsive. Introduced in this installment are X-ray moves, which are deadly attacks that, at least in looks, break bones and puncture innards. What surprised me is how simple they were to pull off. Fill up a meter, and hold down 2 buttons, voila! Here's this brutal attack. Again, the best thing I could compare that to are anime licensed games. In this case, the kind that were developed by Aiding, because who knew Kitana doing this brutal attack gracefully is as easy as pulling these moves off. Seriously, I was expecting something as complex as trying to pull off a Shinku Hadouken in Street Fighter, which I could never pull off to save my life without the 3DS touchscreen. And of course, we can't talk Mortal Kombat without the fatalities. Depending on the character, they can still be pretty tricky to pull off, but at least NetherRealm gave us the opportunity to include them in the pause menu's moveset list, making them easy to check and see what the right input is and end your foes in Mortal Kombat's gory glory.
Raiden wins. Fatality.
What is also great is that Mortal Kombat sound veteran Dan Forden has once again composed a matching soundtrack for each stage, for both classic remixes for the classic stages, and new tracks for new stages like Shang Tsung's Garden. Even the sound of X-ray moves being pulled off feel wince-inducing as it is to look at them. Visually, the game looks stunning, and I'd go as far as to say that Mortal Kombat hasn't looked any better since with its style. Sure, some of the designs for a lot of the female characters are perhaps a bit much, says a guy who has a bit of fondness for both of Kitana's then recent costumes especially, and I never really cared for how Sonya Blade looks like a clone of Nina Williams. But besides that, a lot of the designs still work in matching with the character's classic looks. Of course, it wouldn't be a great fighting game without the replayability. And between local and online multiplayer, Challenge Tower where you fight under differing rules than normal, the amount of characters with their own endings in arcade mode, and how much junk there is to unlock in the crypt, you're in for a treat. Unfortunately, the game has no current digital version to access due to licensing issues with some of the guest stars. Thank the gods for physical media. In the end, you're in for a hell of a good time.